back to the channel. Many of you have told me that you'd rather have the 7 over any of my other cars. Well, to each their own, but I'll tell you this. For me, it's either this car, the SV, or the Mercy. Especially driving around, as many of you have documented with me the difficulties in driving the 7. But really what we're here for today is to put the 7 on the dyno, which I will inform all of you is not an easy task, at least to do it right. There's tons of prep work, finding all sorts of parts, including, believe it or not, C16 race fuel, which was a huge problem for me. And I didn't have a spare engine build, so I had to have the rotary god, Abel, build me some spare rotors just in case I lose an engine, because I didn't want to take a chance of losing the current engine in the car, which all of you know is already hurt, and not being able to get it up and running again. So I'll have to kind of see how everything goes. Undoubtedly, my friend Murphy will be in full swing, as he is with all of my projects. So all I can say is, let's hope for the best, that everything goes smooth. My bud David asked me, how much power do I think the 7 will make? I have absolutely no idea. Many of you that saw the video on the 7 compression know that at least one combustion chamber is down. My suspicion is a side seal. And I'll be honest, if it makes over 550, I'll be ecstatic. Off the nitrous, of course. Now, all we can do is get into it and see what happens. For all of you that don't go on the dyno a lot, what I can recommend is having your act together before you go. I don't know if you remember when I did a video on Abel, he does a lot of dyno work, and he was saying that the #1 problem is the cars are not ready to go when they show up. Now, for me, that's not so much of a problem, because as you can see, the dyno is sitting in the middle of my shop, so it's not like I'm gonna get charged extra time if I take longer. However, all time is valuable as far as I'm concerned. So now let's go over the list of what I need to do to get this thing prepped to dyno. I'm sure with all the messing around I've been doing on the 7, I've got some pretty decent fuel dilution. That coupled with the fact that the dyno is just hard on cars. I've blown up more than my fair share of cars on the dyno, looking for every ounce of horsepower I can get. I'm gonna go ahead and go with the Mobil 1 1550 to give me as much cushion as possible. Ideally, it would be best to bring the 7 over to the lift, because not only do I need to change engine oil, I need to clean the fuel filter. But that's just not practical right now because it's raining. Actually, it was just hailing a minute ago. So I don't want to take all my other cars and move them outside, especially the Lambos or Ferraris, and get them drenched just to move the 7 over. So every now and then I come up against a task where I need to work on the ground, which isn't favorable as my old tire body hates it. However, I did come across something that I want to share with you. If you don't have a lift, or you just don't have a means to get there at any given time and need to work on the ground, I will show you something that I bought that I've been looking at for a really long time, and it's well worth it. This, my friends, is an airbag lift that actually will go underneath the lowered cars. And check this out. Now that makes my life a whole lot easier. Any of you that are struggling with floor jacks like I will, the handles get in the way. Look at how low profile this thing, and look at how fast it is. You don't have to use a whole lot of this just to pull that lever. And the cool thing is, it's low. Usually to get a floor jack underneath the 7, I've got to use lumber to get the car up or use the go jacks. This thing slides right under. Whenever I head to the dyno, I always check the crib. I don't know how many cars that I've blown up because the crib is off. For those of you that don't know what the crib is, it's a crank index position. And why is it so important? Well, because whatever numbers you're fueling into the table for timing depend on that. If your reference point is wrong, your timing numbers are wrong, which leads to ultimate disaster. Whenever my race cars are heading to dyno, it is always mandatory that I change the spark plugs. So on the 7, My favorite plug of choice is the NGK, and I use heat range 11. Right there you can see the part number. I pulled the rear housing leading plug. Usually that takes the most abuse, but that's not really the reason why I pulled that plug. It was really the only shot we could get where you can kind of see what I'm doing. And at that, it wasn't all that wonderful. However, the proof is always in the plug. So take a look here. You can see right there that that plug is a bit foul. Here's a good comparison shot of the used plug on the left and the new plug on the right. That, of course, is fairly foul. Now, an explanation. Why is it foul so bad? A couple reasons. One is I'm running premium leaded fuel in there with 1 ounce per gallon of two-stroke oil to try and release a side seal that I believe is stuck. So now I'll be converting back over to C16 race fuel and going in at a 1/2 ounce per gallon. And running properly, that plug would look a lot different. But getting back to what we're doing now with the new plug, I will now apply dielectric grease and a bit of copper antices to send it back in. Back here at the dyno, there have been some interesting developments. Again, going back to life lessons, and I've mentioned to all of you that it's not a good idea to let things sit. Well, you can see the 7 is strapped down and ready to go. As I was getting ready to strap down the 7, it seemed like something was wrong. The roller wasn't stopping the way it should, the hand control on the dyno wasn't working. So then I thought maybe my computer wasn't working correctly, so I brought over my newer laptop that I do my CAD work with to sub in to hopefully get going. Unfortunately, the computer didn't work, so I called my friends at Dynojet that I haven't spoken to in maybe 20 years, and amazingly enough, I was still on file. So they were nice enough to give me some tech support, try to get me up and running, and that didn't work. But what they determined was this. This is called the stack. This basically controls everything on the dyno from top to bottom. And it has a battery inside of it that I guess keeps some memory for the firmware. And since I let mine sit for so long with no power, it completely lost its memory and no longer is supported and just doesn't function anymore. However, it does light up, so I mean I could use the lights if I wanted to use it for something. But other than that, it pretty much is worthless. But luckily, all the in-ground guts are the same. They just need to be updated, and they sell this what they call RT upgrade, which is the bargain price of $2,500. It actually is a bargain. I'm not being sarcastic, because that upgrades the whole system to be current, and without it, I literally have just a hunk of junk here. So I will go ahead and order that, and we'll see what they send me. What seemed like an instant to you was quite a long wait for me, because they build these to order. And of course had to figure out everything about my dyno since it was very old and one of the original models they sold. And looking at what I brought out here, this is the upgraded RT unit. The one thing that I will say is that anything when there's a hazardous, high voltage, possibly kill you, risk of fire, these aren't things that instill confidence in me. I don't see any of those things on the old stack unit. If you look at the table here, there's just a mess of cables. So hopefully this will rectify all my problems. Otherwise, I've just created a whole bunch of work for no reason. I will point this out for those of you that are thinking of upgrading to this. If you have the older model dynos like myself, this is what you look for. A very thick instruction manual, because you know that they care. What that translates to is they really don't want you calling to bug them. Now the floor of the dyno is out, and that is a very large hole. I've not seen that for a long time, and you just kind of forget since it's covered. But now I need to go down in the hole where there seems to be like a large infestation of spiders that I'm sure I'll make friends with, and see if I can find the components I have to change out for the upgrade. It's a fairly lonely place here in the dyno hole, and the best part about it is that luckily I didn't come across any dead animals. Which, as you can see, it's quite filthy under here because it never gets cleaned. But I was able to get the updated speed pickup on and also rewire the brakes. So that should all be compatible with the RT system. We'll see how everything goes. Well, all right, you can see that I've got the 7 all tied down. First thing we need to do is run it on the rollers to center the car up. It has been a very long time since I've had the 7 ready to roll, especially on the dyno. Just getting the computer, which is archaic, set up and running, took a whole lot of time. Now, as you can see, everything is tied down, ready to roll. Will it actually work? I don't know. There you have it. All of you saw it. I'm a very happy man, and not because of the power, but because nothing blew up, which means less work for me, which I'm always happy about, by the way. But it didn't come without a myriad of problems, and I'm glad the dyno's up and working because now I can dyno some other cars that maybe some of you are interested in. But the dyno is just a rough deal, as I told you. I'm just happy that I got off without blowing it up. And as far as using it for ultimate power, that's not really my gameplay. For me, the dyno is really the tool to see what exactly the tuning changes make. The dyno itself compensates for barometric pressure, temperature, so even from day to day, things will change. I highly recommend if you're going to tune, try and do it in one session. Otherwise, even if it's the next day, to get the best results, you probably have to do another baseline. Now, for the all-important question, how much did it make? Well, here we go. It made 616, much more than I thought it would on a Hurt engine, and that is off the nitrous. Now, how much did it make when everything was good and was making 110 pounds of compression per chamber? Well, it used to make around 650, 660 off the nitrous, which would push me up at about 700, 710 with a 50 shot. And that's what it took to run in the 8s. Would the 7 do it now? I don't know. Maybe not. I'd probably have to rebuild the engine and make it faster, or take the chance of giving it more nitrous, which could ultimately lead to just more catastrophic issues on my end. But in any case, I feel fairly confident it will hold, making it to Hoonigans, which is the goal, isn't it? And on top of that, I hadn't even put it on the 2-step because I didn't have C16 in it. But as all of you heard, it definitely sounds pretty healthy. Other than that, it is time for me to enjoy the rest of my time in the SV. So, I hope all of you have a great weekend. Sorry, there's some giant vultures in the middle of the road here. Just don't want to move. Fuck. But anyways, getting back to what we were talking about.
Goose egg. The one, so he had me on Jardins for a while, right? Which is bitchin' stuff. You know, the cool thing about Jardins was I felt kind of bad about it, in a way, because it was my secret weapon, because I